The essence of existence lies in attributing significance to life itself. What motivates the human spirit to persevere? Perhaps the purest answer to this inquiry can be found in the darkest corners of humanity. Victor Frel, an Austrian psychiatrist, philosopher, and author, endured 3 years in 4 different concentration camps. Within those walls, he encountered sadistic SS guards and inmates who willingly collaborated with the Nazis, exhibiting even greater ruthlessness than their captors. The prisoners endured perpetual famine, illness, forced labor, and the constant threat of punishment or execution. Freedom was non-existent. The prisoners wandered like defenseless sheep, subjected to the kicks and beatings of their oppressors, stripped of their humanity and dignity. In such a horrific environment, where liberties and possessions were stripped away and death loomed imminently, one may question whether there is any reason to persist in life. Victor Frel, however, concluded that even in the direst circumstances, life always retains a purpose, and suffering holds meaning. If we can grasp this significance, akin to a guiding star in the night sky, we can transcend even the most agonizing circumstances, as Victor Frel believed. It is not pleasure, success, or power that truly drives individuals. Rather, it is the discovery of something, a purpose, a meaning, to live and, if necessary, die for. What is the purpose of my existence? What is the meaning behind all of this? These questions echo through our current societal condition, particularly in the Western world, where our lives often revolve around pursuing meaningless jobs to accumulate wealth, which in turn serves to numb our sense of purposelessness. In an era of globalization, secularization, and relative peace, we struggle to find meaning in traditional sources such as community, religion, or defending our loved ones and nations against external threats. Everything appears dull and devoid of purpose, leading us to indulge in rampant consumerism and distractions to escape the deep-seated feeling of emptiness that plagues our existence. And before we know it, nihilism seeps in, and we question the point of it all. Why should we continue? It would be unjust to directly compare the circumstances of a modern Westerner with those who endured the horrors of concentration camps during World War II. However, it is peculiar that we carry similar existential questions and share common reasons for contemplating the abandonment of life. The lack of purpose, the despair of hopelessness, the burden of meaninglessness. When we find ourselves trapped in what Victor Frel referred to as the existential vacuum, despair awaits us. During his time in the concentration camps, Frel observed a divide among the prisoners, those who had given up on life and those who had not. The former group exhibited higher vulnerability to illness and death, while the latter demonstrated greater resilience. The distinguishing factor was the presence of meaning, specifically the discovery of purpose within their unbearable living conditions. For instance, Frel himself, a doctor, found purpose in tending to the sick inmates. He even declined an opportunity to escape the camp to stay with his patients. His motivation was not driven by wealth, status, power, or freedom. His purpose, in this case, was to care for his fellow human beings and refuse to abandon them, even at the cost of his own life. His existence became a profound sacrifice imbued with significance. On the other hand, Frel wrote about those who succumbed to the harsh conditions of the camp. They shared a common reasoning for giving up: there is nothing left to expect from life. Devoid of meaning and devoid of faith in the potential for a favorable turn of events, their bodies and minds withered, and their will to live faded away. Frel recounted the story of a prisoner who dreamt of the war's end and his eventual release. His dream even revealed the date of liberation, March 13, 1945. Filled with hope, he eagerly anticipated that day. But when March 13 came and went without any change, his prophecy proved naive, and he was left disheartened. Shortly after, he fell ill with typhus and succumbed to death. However, when faced with horrifying and hopeless circumstances, is it fair to expect individuals to find meaning? Aren't there situations that are simply too overwhelming, eradicating one's responsibility to choose? When reflecting on the validity of human liberty amid the concentration camp horrors, Frel concluded that even in such terrible conditions of mental and physical stress, we retain a vestige of spiritual freedom and independence of mind. Thus, we always possess a choice. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man except one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. The ruthless kapos devoid of morality, the sadistic SS guards with no regard for human life, the prisoners who lost their will to live, and the guards who attempted to aid the inmates, all of them were accountable for their life choices. Therefore, regardless of how dire life may seem, we still possess the capacity and the responsibility to determine our path. Do we choose to betray our principles and commit brutal acts to escape torture and death in the concentration camps? Do we succumb to peer pressure and embrace hateful ideologies? Do we surrender to a nihilistic, self-destructive mindset due to living in a consumerist society that appears morally and spiritually bankrupt? Do we allow ourselves to become mere playthings of our circumstances? According to the inherent spiritual freedom that cannot be taken away, life gains meaning and purpose. The way in which a man accepts his fate and all the suffering it entails, the way in which he takes up his cross, gives him ample opportunity, even under the most difficult circumstances, to add a deeper meaning to his life. Waking up every morning without a meaningful long-term goal. The only reason for getting out of bed would be the necessity of going to work and engaging in activities we despise, all to sustain a hollow existence filled with countless meaningless pleasures as a coping mechanism. We blame our past, our parents, our circumstances, and even our genetics for the lack of purpose in our lives. However, in reality, we can still transcend our predicaments and find purpose irrespective of external conditions. The question, of course, is how. Before delving into the how of meaning, it is helpful to explore the why of meaning, particularly in the present age. There is a tendency to prioritize money, status, power, and pleasure over a life filled with significance. Yet, according to Frel, these pursuits are mere means of coping with the existential vacuum we experience. They are a consequence of the absence of meaning in a society obsessed with seeking pleasure and accumulating wealth. It is often challenging to recognize that these pursuits fail to fill the void within us and merely serve as inadequate substitutes for what truly matters. A more direct approach to addressing the pain of meaninglessness that we witness today is the pursuit of happiness. In certain circles, such as the good vibes only movement, happiness has become a prerequisite, an expected state of being. There is nothing inherently wrong with happiness, as it represents the ultimate state of pleasantness and can be achieved by following teachings from Stoicism and Buddhism, for example. However, as Frel argues, happiness itself cannot be pursued, it must ensue. One must have a reason to be happy. Once the reason is found, however, one becomes happy automatically. As we see, a human being is not one in pursuit of happiness, but rather in search of a reason to become happy, last but not least, through actualizing the potential meaning inherent and dormant in a given situation. The same principle applies to success. Frel asserts that success must also ensue rather than be pursued, as it is the unintended consequence of dedicating oneself to a greater cause. The more we obsess over success, the less we can focus on our purpose, and the less likely it becomes. Yet, if we dedicate ourselves to a meaningful cause and release our attachment to success, it is more likely to manifest as a byproduct in the long run. Thus, meaning lies at the core of both happiness and success, while the absence of it leads to indulgence and addiction to fleeting pleasures, wealth, fame, and power. Having elucidated this, let us explore the how of meaning. First and foremost, Frel emphasizes that the meaning of life is subjective and dependent on the individual, the moment, and the circumstances. There is no universally applicable meaning that suits everyone at all times. He illustrates this notion with a metaphorical chess analogy. Imagine posing the question to a chess champion, "Tell me, master, what is the best move in the world?" The champion's response would be that there is none. The best move in chess depends entirely on the specific situation in the game and the unique characteristics of one's opponent. Likewise, we cannot invent the meaning of our existence, but we can discern it. As Frel posits, meaning is inherent and latent within a given situation. We can uncover our purpose only through active engagement with the world, enabling us to identify the needs and aspirations of others. The first avenue to discover meaning lies in creation and action. Accomplishments and creative pursuits, such as writing a book, creating art, sharing personal stories of suffering and life experiences, or solving contemporary issues through scientific and technological breakthroughs, can all contribute to the well-being of others. We can only discover this meaning when we take the initial step, immersing ourselves in the world and recognizing the needs of those around us. The significance of performing acts of goodwill requires no further explanation. Even small gestures like sharing a morsel of bread with a starving inmate can be profoundly meaningful. The second pathway lies in our connections with people and things. Finding meaning through the experience of life itself, caring for the environment and its inhabitants, can hold inherent value. Frel describes this as love, arguing that genuine understanding necessitates love. The second way of finding meaning in life is by experiencing something, such as goodness, truth, and beauty, experiencing nature and culture, or, last but not least, experiencing another human being in their unique individuality, by loving them. The third avenue lies in finding meaning through suffering. Frel provides an example of an elderly patient who sought his counsel due to severe depression following the loss of his wife. Instead of offering advice, Frel posed a question: "What would have happened, doctor, if you had died first, and your wife had to survive you?" The patient responded, "Oh, for her, that would have been terrible. How she would have suffered." Frel pointed out that the doctor's wife was spared such suffering because he paid the price by outliving her and mourning her loss. In many situations, such as being imprisoned in a concentration camp, we may have limited control over external factors. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Frel asserts that by altering our attitude, we can transform adversity into triumph. Even within the harshest sufferings imaginable, we can unearth meaning. The philosophy of Victor Frel can be succinctly summarized as follows: discovering something worth living for, even worth dying for, can transform an existence devoid of meaning and hope into a life that is truly worth living, regardless of the circumstances. Therefore, he quotes, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Thank you for your time and attention.